are so many inventions that we just enjoy and take for granted, not knowing how they came to be or who was responsible for the breakthrough. Well, I'd say that for most of us, that is also the case of our electronic devices, from our computers and cell phones, also to those less visible ones, such as cars and many appliances. One of the main people responsible for the creation of the microprocessor, which brought all the computing power of the huge mainframe computers to a small piece, and therefore allow us to have all of these devices, is Federico Faggin, and he's here with me today. Federico has received over 100 awards for his contributions in these fields, but now he's turning his focus to study concepts such as consciousness and self, and also topics like life beyond this ordinary material world and the nature of reality. So let's explore what he has to say. I invite you to explore with me the life, mind, and soul of Federico Faggin and know about his story and scientific endeavors, but also about the person behind it. Federico, hi, thank you so much for being with us. It's such a great pleasure.
Thank you for inviting me.
It's a pleasure. May I start, Federico, maybe by bringing a little bit back to the beginnings and ask you, when you just started your career in physics, did you have an idea of what impact that your work would have in the world?
Not really.
No. Of course.
But I was interested to understand how the world works. And that's why I went and took physics instead of, say, engineering, which was what I really intended to do anyway. But so physics for me was a way to explore the nature of reality. How does it work? So that desire to have a deep understanding was there from the very beginning when I was a young boy.
Yes. If you think of the impact of that in that work and the work you are doing now, which is somehow also exploring the world, right? But which of them, or both maybe, but how do you see them as fitting into something like your life plan or life mission, or how you see it?
I see the work that I'm doing now more as a completion of something that started with when I was in my teens, and I had a sort of a religious kind of opening, and then it kind of vanished. I grew up and I kind of started doing my stuff and so on, but that, the feelings that I felt at that time were not dissimilar to the feelings, the richer feelings that I felt much later.
I see.
So the exploration of consciousness, the exploration of the nature of reality, considering consciousness as a fundamental aspect of reality, irreducible aspect of reality, instead of something that happens in the brain at some point. That exploration, I think, has deep roots, and so I feel like I'm going home.
So it's like all of these kind of brought you to the point you are now.
Yes.
That's very interesting, and it started long time ago. Federico, this greater turn, that is more the last years that you are dedicating more to study consciousness, was there one single thing that prompted that, or was more something that you had been planning before?
Actually, no. I mean, I never planned anything really in my life. It just happened. All the major turns that I took in my life were unpredictable, and I follow my inclination as things presented themselves, and so is this last turn. I would never have expected that my last 20 years of life would have been spent exploring the nature of consciousness. If you had asked me, would you ever consider doing that when I was 30, I would have said, you're out of your mind. So, no.
Quite interesting. Yeah. So now you see that as something that we You find ways to work on it. Now, you have had some experience, so you said some spiritual experiences there in your teens, and some more recent. Would you mind sharing with us what type of experience and what effect they produce? Maybe
Yeah, well, the sort of the turning experience for me happened when I was 48 or 49, and for a number of years before, I was interested in understanding the nature of consciousness, and I wanted to make a conscious computer, or not to make it, but find out if it was possible to make a conscious computer. And so I was exploring on my spare time that idea, thinking that if in fact consciousness is an epiphenomenon or is a emergent property of a complex system, well then a computer should be able to be conscious. So, so the more I thought, the more impossible it appeared, and I was kind of also somewhat frustrated, you know. In those days, I was a materialist, a physicalist. I thought that, you know, that science had the answers, and that you know, the world is made of matter, and that's the end of it. And consciousness is probably, you know, an epiphenomenon. And so that, but I was interested. I was not giving up, and at some level, I think I pray to understand. And so I ended up having a extraordinary experience of consciousness, what generally would be classified as a mystical experience, but I don't want to put names because it doesn't really help, where fundamentally I experienced myself as love, and I was love, and I was the universe which was made of love. But I was also the observer of the universe that is me, that is made of love. So this experience changes all the fundamental paradigms of physicality that you have. Because in ordinary experience, I am a body existing inside a world, and the world is objective, and I interact with other bodies, and I'm separate from the world, and all of that. But in this experience, I am the world. But I'm also the observer of the world. And the world is not made of things, it's made of love. So that was about 20 seconds to a minute, and it changed my life.
You see, that shows for me two things. Number one, you are a true scientist, not only for the things you managed to invent and to create, but also the spirit of, hey, there's here something new. There is here something that turns the way I see the world, and you face it. And also there, the second one, integrity, because many people, they see evidences, but they put it aside because of fear maybe, whatever. So I admire that a lot. But in face of all of this, Federico, how would you define consciousness?
Well, as you know, consciousness is not well defined, but for me, consciousness is a property of something even bigger, which is a self, is a unit of consciousness that can experience itself and the world. And so consciousness is the capacity of this self to have an experience, a sentient experience, an experience made of qualia, made of feelings, but also made of meaning. Because qualia, in my view, are the carriers, are the substrate of meaning. Meaning is what matters to us. When I communicate, I want to communicate the meaning that I feel to somebody else. And you will hear my words, and you will try to reconstruct within yourself the meaning that I want to convey. But the meaning is not electrical signals or, potentials and, chemical things in the brain. No. That is beyond. Those are symbolic aspects of reality, but the meaning is not symbolic. The meaning is the semantics of reality.
So if I followed you correct me if it's not exact what I'm saying. It's like consciousness would be a way of the selves to express, right? So you see it as a property, if I would say, but not of the physical body, instead of a self.
Yeah. Is the capacity to have an experience in order to know itself and the world.
Yes, but then in this case brings me to what is self there for you?
Yeah.
In your
The
theory?
self is the way reality manifests. It manifests in the form of units of consciousness that have a unique identity. The self is the fact that I know myself within myself. I have a unique identity like you do, like everybody else does. And so the self is a fundamental property of the way one, if one is the totality of what exists, the way that one perceives itself. A perception of one, of the totality of what exists, brings into reality a new unit of consciousness, a new self.
I see.
So it, because a perception is energy that is structure. I don't call it energy anymore
Yes.
because people say, well, what are you talking about, energy?
Yes, yeah.
So I call it nous. Nous is the Greek name for mind, for intellect,
Nice.
deep mind.
So it's like the information that comes. with
It's
the
more
energy.
than information. It's the meaning that the information is supposed
I
to
see.
convey.
I see.
You see, so this unit that perceives itself has some substance. Some I call it nous, but it's not a physical substance. It's not material substance. It's not. It's really something that has two aspects: an inner aspect, which is the meaning aspect, and the outer aspect, which is the informational aspect. So we look at the world and we perceive the world through the information that the world presents to us. But within us, we create a meaning of that world.
I see.
So within us, we have a perception, which
Yes,
is sensate perception, qualia, but also a meaning. So that duality, inner-outer, is a fundamental aspect of a self. I can only know you through the information that you display. I cannot know you directly. The same thing for you. And so that works for everybody.
And do you think one can know oneself directly?
Yes. See, there is a complication here because we are embodied, we are materialized consciousness. So the consciousness that exists in its pristine form, in its natural form, is not embodied, is not inside a body. Our body is like a symbol, it's like a structure, like a computer that takes information from the world and creates new information on the other side of the computer that consciousness perceives as the world. So the body is, takes something which is out there and presents a picture to us, which is not necessarily what the actual world is. The world may be very different than what we perceive the world to be.
So I think it brings us naturally to ask you about that so many different hypotheses we have nowadays, that reality is a simulation, right?
Yep.
So we have different angles. How does that fit in your theory? How would you explain that?
Well, I don't see, a simulation implies a computer. Obviously, there cannot be a computer. God is not a computer at the bottom of it all that creates all this game that we call the physical world and so on. So that would be silly, frankly. But most people, are exploring that possibility. But in some way, these conscious units that I'm talking about, they are communicating with each other. In order to communicate with each other, they have to use information. The information comes from the informational side of themselves. So initially, they can communicate by highlighting some of the outer information that they have, and you see a symbol, and you begin to understand me, and I see a symbol within you. You are nous at that point. And so little by little, we create a language. Out of that language, we have now we have rules, which are the syntactical rules of any language, and the tokens, which are the elements of this language, the words, the symbols, the fundamental symbols. So all of a sudden, you can create what appears to be a computer. So the computer is actually the hierarchy of languages of all these selves and combination of selves which are interacting together to create their own experience and to know themselves, because the foundational idea that I'm using is that one desires to know itself.
So that would be the main drive.
That's the fundamental drive. That's what drives evolution. So evolution is the movement of one toward knowing itself ever deeper, ever more.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
But would you ever think that maybe digital system could be how do I say, the vehicle for a consciousness to manifest in the same way that this body now is one for us?
No, I don't think so. I think that a computer cannot be conscious, because a computer is strictly a symbol manipulator. It does not have any meaning. The stuff of which the computer is made are bits. The bits are not conscious. Okay? We are made of atoms and molecules and elementary particles. The elementary particles are conscious, but not as elementary particles. The quantum fields are the selves. The analog of a self, because they're not necessarily the self, the CUs that I was talking about earlier, but they're analogous to a self. And so what I'm saying is that the consciousness of an electron is not in the electron itself. In fact, I don't even believe that an electron itself exists as such. It is a construction, is an object that we have imagined, but it's not real. What is real is the quantum field, which is a part whole. It is both a part and a whole of reality. It cannot be taken apart from a reality which is holistic, which is a whole, which is indivisible. So the quantum field of electrons cannot be taken out like you could take, an apple out of the room, and now the room is without apple. No, everything is interacting with everything else, and if you were to take the quantum field of electrons out, you would not have this universe. You would have a completely different universe, perhaps not even a universe. The whole thing may fall apart. But of course we cannot do that. But the point is to make that electrons, as we imagine, they are little particles that you can move around, separate from each other. But actually, the most advanced theoretical physicists think of an electron as a state of the quantum field.
I see.
Is an excited state of the quantum field of electrons, which is not a particle. Is a state. Okay.
That is interesting.
Yeah. So the same would be here. So in the area, when we look at ourselves as selves, we have this same quality of being a part whole, like a field. And so within us there is information that we can use to display what we feel outside, so that you can understand me and I understand you. But what I feel inside myself arises simultaneously from, I call it, from one. One is a sort of is this wholeness that captures all. And so from that oneness comes your own perception of yourself, which is not symbolic. That is a direct knowing of who you are. That's the truth. Yeah. Is a very much a subjective truth. Is your truth, and I cannot I cannot question that. It is the truth of who you are, and that arises spontaneously out of who you are, and at the same time that it arises as meaning within you, it arises as information in the outer face that you present to the world.
What you are saying is super interesting, Federico. I think I get it. Of course, it's a different perspective of life or a different way of seeing life. And I would like to ask you, how does that fit then with that experience you had that was an expansion of consciousness or mystical experience, whatever we are going to call that? Because in that experience, you felt like one with yourself and one with the world, and love was what was the main element in the world. So how much of that inspired you, and what's the connection there, if you help us see this, please?
Yes. I think that the nature of the consciousness units comes from that experience. In other words, my sense is that the consciousness units, when they're not incarnated, they're not inside the body, they are actually perceiving the world, which is others use, as self, but also as not self, because they have a unique point of view as they perceive the world. So that came from exactly from that experience.
From that experience,
I would not have been able to articulate this if I did not have this experience, because it looks crazy. If one hasn't had a similar experience, it doesn't sound. It sounds like I'm,
like
crazy.
It would come from nowhere.
But, what is it talking about?
Yes, but of course, having had some experiences myself, I see a lot of logics in what you are saying from the point of view that sometimes there are whatever selves, so I'll use the terminology there, or that would observe more than we do. And therefore, all of this, the body and reality, it's like a theater. It's something that does not have their views the same meaning as it has to us. But as you said, for us it's meaning, right?
Yes.
It's what we relate to, is what we see. Do you think, Federico, that then this maybe consensual reality that we see, was that created by something or someone or one consciousness or one self, or we participated? How do you see, how does that come in your theory?
Right. Well, I see that we are part of a hierarchy of conscious selves. We all are combinations of these fundamental units. So we emerge from these consciousness units like molecules emerge from the elementary fields of particles.
I see.
So it would be a similar kind of image, except in physics, the quantum fields are simply information. They're simply matter or information, depending on how you look at matter. And in the case of the model that I'm describing, this information has an inner side, which is made of meaning. But the outer side could be be it like a quantum field. Okay, so it's really adding something without taking anything away. Information, there is information, but it's not all that exists. And information without meaning, frankly, doesn't make any sense to me.
So in this model, do you think that there would be selves in different, maybe in cells or in the organs or in the objects? How do you see that, Federico?
Yes. Just like the self is not in the electron, but is in the field. And the electron is really an impression. It's something that we think that exists, but it's not really. It's the camouflage of the field. Okay. The same way it is for us. We have to think of ourselves as part of a larger being, which in turn may be part of a larger being yet, and so on and so forth. I don't think that we are at the top of the pile of cells. We are probably somewhere in the middle. And so there are many cells which are below us and many cells that are above us. And we are right in the middle. But because we are incarnated, we are embodied, we are materialized, we are actually not experiencing reality the way the non-materialized self experiences reality.
I see.
The non-materialized self experiences reality similarly to my extraordinary experiences that I described earlier. In other words, they feel part of the world and the observer of the world simultaneously and so on. When we are identified with the body, we think that we are the body, which is normal in our condition. We perceive only the information that is produced by the body. The body, which is part of this physical reality, is made of subselves and so on, perceives reality, only a small portion of reality, and presents this output presents some information that the selves that we are believes to be reality, but in fact it is a camouflage of reality. So out there, we don't know what's out there. We basically our body is a transformer of reality into objects and things that make sense to us. But they're not necessarily real in the sense that we perceive them to be.
So we can say, Federico, that one experience like that one you had, in which there was an expansion of the capacity to grasp reality in a way, whatever that reality we are talking about, could we say that then allowed you to experience a reality that would be more like those non-embodied selves would experience?
Yes, that's basically what I would now explain after 30 years of work. I would explain as having for a moment disconnected myself from the information of the body to where my consciousness actually was able to perceive the real reality. Not what is produced by the body, but what is actually out there.
Of course. Not the illusion of reality that we all share for different reasons.
It's like if you are inside a virtual reality game made by a computer, and your mother asks you to come to dinner, you had to exit from that world, and you now are. And all of a sudden, you have table.
There a nice pasta in front of you, right? Very good, Federico. Very nice. Now, there's something in your model also that you talk about how the universe somehow is fine-tuned for consciousness and for life. So it goes back a little bit maybe to cosmology. So how do you see that, Federico? If you could elaborate a little so that we get to know what.
Yes, well, this model hopes at some point when it is further developed to provide some clues as to the nature of reality, particularly the nature of reality before the Big Bang, and also what happened, during the Big Bang and after the Big Bang, as a guiding model, because physicists do not want to speculate. They don't want to create models that they have no way to verify, and it's a good principle. But if you want to try to explain something that you have no way to know, you had to speculate for a while, and you had to see, to create a logical structure, and then see where it leads. And hopefully, this model that I'm constructing, little by little, is going to lead to giving explanations of how things may have happened. And the way I look at this, if you look at the way physicists develop their model, they start with mathematics, and then they apply mathematics to something, and then they say, okay, it evolved this way, often with the knowing what happened afterwards, and then they say, well, then we have to tweak some parameters of the model in order that electrons will show up. Otherwise, if the certain parameters are not, appropriate, no electrons will show up. Okay, so this is a posteriori knowledge, and then they claim that their mathematics predicted what will happen. Well, no, they didn't predict, because they knew what would happen, and then they went back and tweaked the model in order to make it do
until it fits to what's going to happen, and then the prediction works.
Okay, so but there is an even deeper, deeper criticism, if you want, that I'm advancing here, because the mathematics, in my view, is not God-given. There is no God-given mathematics, and many mathematicians are Platonic. They think the mathematics exists before anything exists. But I think that mathematics actually is the account of the interactions that developed in the languages used by conscious units and combinations of conscious units as they evolve. So they describe relationships between the language, the symbolic languages used by the selves
I see.
to communicate. So mathematics is really the historical accounts of these relationships.
I get
So
you.
mathematics is born because of the communication, because of the language.
Because
that
of the
these
need
units,
of these conscious units to
know
communicate.
themselves and to communicate.
I see.
So mathematics is not
So it was like the
God-given.
symbol that was created.
So mathematics
I see.
is born out of these communications, and so and these communications, of course, are driven by meaning, where the symbols are necessary to communicate, and they allow more meaning to come forth, and more meaning begets different symbols and more symbols, and so is this loop that keeps on growing. Okay, so mathematics, when a physicist say this is the mathematics that I'm going to use to show how the Big Bang happened, well, they are imposing on reality their idea of how that evolved.
Yes.
The mathematics wasn't there yet. The mathematics was not there yet. The mathematics actually evolved with with reality, inner and outer reality. It evolved, and so late it evolved, in my opinion, in such a way that life could emerge simply because life is the only structure that a consciousness could embody.
That brings me to a point, because I know you intended and saw the need to create a new or special different mathematics, right, for your model and maybe present to the world. How is it? Could you elaborate a little bit more on that for us?
Yes, well, at some point you need to have a mathematical model. And I think that to have one, I need to do more work in completing this model in a way that all aspects of the model make sense. They are self-coherent, they are self-consistent. I'm probably 1 or 2 years away from that. And then the work of figuring out what type of mathematics will be needed to describe the informational aspect of reality. Mathematics cannot describe the meaning.
Yes.
Okay, but it can describe the informational aspect.
Yes.
And I have what I call a correspondence principle, which is that if the meaning changes, the symbols changes, and vice versa. So because of that, a symbolic description is possible, but is only possible for the stuff that has happened, not for the stuff that will happen.
I see.
So any new meaning that was never known before cannot be predicted by that math, because the new meaning will create new math.
Yes.
You see?
And
it
the
creates
new
new
meaning will
relationships
create new
that
meaning.
were not there before. So mathematics will allow us to do, to improve and understand and so on. But if most people think that then mathematics will make prediction, it will do, no. In fact, even the quantum physics is probabilistic. It is exactly the mathematics of information. Why? Because meaning is what matters.
Yes.
If I write a book 5 years from now, that book will obey the laws of symbols, and yet I'm free to write whatever meaning I want. So you cannot say that the mathematics has predicted the book that I will write 5 years from now, because I don't even know what I'm going to write 5 years from now. But it can predict that my book will obey the laws of symbols, and that it will do.
Federico, I could see how you would get up at 5 in the morning and start working on that, because even I am excited and I would like to know more and ask you, tell us how it works. But I'm not sure I would completely follow when you explain, but really so interesting. I would like to understand so much. How far through it are you, Federico? You said another 2 years, but...
About 4 years, I would say, since I really determined to develop this model. Up until that time, I've been mostly exploring consciousness on first-person basis, on a first-person basis, because that's the only way you can explore consciousness.
Yes.
And so I learned a lot. I had a lot of extraordinary experiences of consciousness. So the first one that I described is not the only one. So I have collected a lot of material to be able to create a model that has to describe things that would not appear logical in a if you believe only in the physical world.
Yes.
For example, if you go out of body, how are you going to explain that with physics?
Yes, that was going to be my next question.
For example,
because
or if you even special dreams where they are more vivid and more important than a real experience. How can you explain that if it is just a lucubration of the brain? It doesn't make sense. I mean, a brain that is not, that produces more coherence than when is normally or ordinarily coherent. How can you explain that? So so the world is full of those mysteries that conventional science today cannot explain.
How does the out-of-body experience fit into your model, Federico?
Well, it's it's obviously a phenomenon which is fairly widely distributed. So there are a small percentage of people that do that routinely. So that's already something that needs to be explained. It's not just one case or one person, one time. I mean, it's and the fact that the consciousness appears to be able to have its own autonomy outside of the body is not an easy thing to explain. Some people have given some explanations, but they simply don't fit the experience. So there are explanations about their interpretation of what is an out-of-body, but it's not what out-of-body is, because if they had one, they would know that they're not explaining that.
Explanation doesn't fit.
That's right. So basically, it's a it shows that consciousness is more than the physical body. How does it work? That is all an open question that obviously needs to be studied.
And of course, I understand from what you are saying that your out-of-body experiences provided you also maybe some elements, data for you to keep examining and seeing how your model would fit.
That's correct.
Now, what about free will? How does free will enter there?
Well, free will is a foundational aspect of the consciousness unit. So free will is a given, so to speak. You start with free will. Free will is the ability to actually act, and an action ultimately for the CU is a communication. So free will is the realization that a CU has that it can actually communicate, and it can communicate freely using symbols. So that's trained by our body. And if we believe that we are our body, we are completely constrained by our body. So you have to question, if you believe to be only your body as a physical thing, you do not have free will.
I understand, because you are restricting yourself.
You are restricting
and therefore
yourself.
you are not using your true self to
That's
exercise.
Correct. That's correct.
I see what you mean.
So see, therefore, if a physicalist is right to say that there is no free will, but that is only if you believe that you are a physical being, and only a physical being, your body. And that's exactly why I'm working so hard, because I believe that if science is telling us that we are machines, we will behave like machines. You see?
Yes.
And so it is a self-fulfilling prophecy. We have to break this spell. This is not true. Okay? We are more than a computer.
When we think of all of that, and we think of science, the role of science, because that is so complicated. When we talk about the out-of-body experience, which is a phenomenon that Of course, there are people that they create fantasies, but there are so many serious people trying to study the out-of-body experience throughout decades, if not hundreds of years. But still, we don't manage to go further. And when we think about near-death experience, which is a phenomenon I think much easier to study and explain and more accepted in a way, because it's that one thing, because of that cardiac arrest or whatever, then it's a little bit more accepted, but we don't move on. All we have is a collection of another report and another report and another report. Nothing comes out of that to make us move on to another step. So what I would like to ask you is, do you think there is any different approach to research into maybe out-of-body experience to start with, to help us enlighten a little bit more and get out of this loop of... because it would make a big difference, I think, to the world if this could be understood.
Yes. Yeah, I think that definitely there are phenomena that can be studied to determine if in fact consciousness is more than the body. Okay? Science likes to go a step at a time and be sure to make reproducible experiments and so on. But unfortunately, the way these phenomena are work, they're not at will phenomena. So it isn't like even people that go out of body, they cannot go out of body every time they want to go out of body. And so there is a level of spontaneity involved that cannot be controlled by conventional will. So the way that science studies in laboratory setting and so on, this phenomena would not work. Would not work, and that's a big problem. But the problem is that we cannot say then that those phenomena don't exist just because you cannot study them in laboratory. So the tendency of scientists is to pretend that if they are real, they can be reproducible. But who says so? Who says so? And I mean, if you want to, out of near-death experience, if you want to study at will, you have to probably, there are movies about that.
And of course, science would demand not only the replication, but also predictability. But probably there is some variable there that we are not aware of or we don't understand.
We don't understand. So it's really a problem. So that's why a model that will begin to explain things that are not explainable now in a reasonable way, and it makes predictions. Then that is a good way to start, which is what I'm doing. Yeah.
Hopefully, works like yours would help do it, because
I think I'm one of many that are trying to come up with some better explanation. The point is may the best model win, really, because it's really all about making a step forward for mankind.
Making a step forward. That's what I meant. Yeah. Because there are so many different efforts.
Absolutely.
Hopefully, we are going to get somewhere with this.
That's right.
If it's okay with you, Federico, maybe we can go to some philosophical questions, although maybe very pragmatic at the same time. What do you make of the current speed or rate in which our technology develops as compared to the spiritual growth or understanding of reality of most people? What do you make of it?
My sense is that both aspects are accelerating. The fact that myself, I had many extraordinary experiences of consciousness is an indication that I'm not a particularly I'm one of many, and so here we are. So we there is a quickening of the revealing of aspects of self which are not considered normal or ordinary by science. On the other hand, it's also true that both the people that make technological progress and the people that are making spiritual progress are a small percentage in total of the rest of the people. And of course, that is where it's important that some of the ideas, the new ideas, are being received and digested. For sure, the technology advancement is going to continue in the accelerated mode in which we have seen it for the last 50 years. And the human capacity to use technology responsibly, I don't think is keeping pace with the pace of technological development. So we are really, we are really creating the potential for lots of problems in the future. Of course, that combines with the ecosystem issues that we know, global warming and so on, and some denial of some of the people in power of what's going on. The future is
there are some big challenges.
There are challenges in the future. Yes.
Yes. Somehow I would consider logical that someone with a little bit more of understanding of this more complex reality, that this world is not the only reality that exists, would naturally gain a little bit more of ethical principles. And of course, when we talk about ethical principles, we are talking according to some standards, right?
Yes.
Because what may seem ethical to one may not seem to another.
Yes.
But then, of course, ethics has to be one thing, that it's a stable information in a way, so that it's not the ethics here. Ethics, the morals can be different, but ethics is one, and empathy and respect. But we are seeing a world in which it seems that, as you said, we are using a lot of what we know for not so good means. But I also see that there are so many good endeavors and good enterprises that they are not even spoken about.
Yeah.
I think the humankind, the majority is good, not bad, but we hear about the bad.
Yeah.
And somehow we end up empowering those that they have more than they are able to handle. It's like a kid playing with fire, right?
That's right.
And then it comes something interesting, because someone with less of these understanding or ethical principles, having means to access maybe more of a spiritual knowledge, in time would bring ethics to them.
Yes.
But would it be that in the beginning they could also use this in a bad way? I mean, I'm not coming with answers. I'm bringing an issue that would like to hear what you think about it, Federico. Just to hear your more philosophical ideas.
Well, I think that we are not alone also. So there is, there is some guidance individually and collectively. And so we also, and that is really nobody knows, right? So it's very hard to make predictions. I think so far the world has been able to overall to make, I would say, positive progress. If I look at slavery, even a couple hundred years ago in this country, and slavery in the rest of the world, since you can remember, as a massive phenomenon, not as an occasional thing like happens now. That alone is an indication of a spiritual development of mankind that is positive. I'm optimistic, but I also realist enough to know that the challenge in front of us is increasing. We are going to have robots and so on. Will bring the problem of consciousness to the forefront, because it is no longer something for philosophers to discuss that whether they agree or not, or they come with one conclusion or another makes any difference. We are going to live this reality of robotics that is going to force the question: are we like them, or are we more than them? Who are we? And so I hope that people will rise to the occasion. The majority of people will rise to the occasion and begin to see that they are more than those imitation beings that are going to show up.
Yes, and maybe valuing what is it that is different. being
correct.
able to use that and pay more attention to that, because people nowadays, I mean, always, right? Pay attention to what is the surface, the appearance, the status and power. And that takes us further and further from understanding a reality simple enough as only this one. Imagine a bigger reality as you are trying to examine.
Yeah.
So any tips for the young ones, for those who are further in their careers, and those who are maybe thinking there's nothing much more for them to do?
Yeah, well, I mean, it has been said before, because I follow my heart.
I see.
And I never went wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So the bottom line, that's really what I'm going to tell them.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell them to, it's not easy to know what your heart wants.
Yes.
So it's an easy thing to say, but it means to look into your heart, to listen to it,
Yes.
to figure out what really motivates you, what you like, what you want, what do you want to accomplish,
And I think fear must play a big role there, right, Federico?
And I think that's really the important, know yourself ultimately, right? Which is the heart of the model, in terms of the fundamental purpose of reality. So the heart is the messenger of the deepest urges of knowing yourself, and so follow that, and that's it.
Yes, and so many barriers for that. I didn't mean to interrupt you. It's just that a thought that crossed my mind, that it's so logical, but somehow society in general forces us so much into formatted behaviors that people do not know what they like, what they want.
And so most people tend to follow the money.
Yes, follow the money, and even if they feel they would not like to, they are afraid to do something different.
That's right.
That is very
I think the world is telling the young people, follow the money.
Yes.
I say follow
And
the
it has
heart.
been telling for decades.
And the money will come for free.
Sure. Federico, you told us that today you finished your book, right?
Yes.
So it's a good day, good synchronicity. That is one of a series. You have a few of them that you are working, right?
I'm working on 3 books.
On 3 books.
But obviously the first one is important.
Yes.
Is the pace setter. Is a autobiography. But it goes into both my inner and my outer life. First is outer life, of course, then inner life, and then it will describe the model that I'm developing.
I see.
There will be a couple of chapters of that. Then the second book will go deeper into the model, but still for a public that is not a specialized people. And the third book hopefully will have some math, but that is more like 3 years away from now, maybe even 4. So that's and that will be for specialized people that want to go deeper, more scientists than people that
Makes a lot of sense, because you are almost like proposing a new way of seeing life.
Yeah.
And revolutionizing the way we observe things and analyze things.
Yeah.
So of course people need to digest
and
understand where you are going.
Yeah.
Otherwise it's like, wow, what's this lunatic saying?
That's right.
And
they forgot it.
Yes, go to the black hole.
That's right.
Right? And
That's right.
That's great.
Yeah.
It was so wonderful talking to you here this time and letting others share with us what we are talking about. Federico, is there anything I didn't ask that you would like to add or comment on?
What wine do I prefer? Amarone.
Okay, that is good. Note taken. Very good, Federico. So thank you. I only have to thank you. It was great. Thanks to all of you that spent here the time enjoying with us. See you next time.